We continue today with our the introduction of Arokh HaShulhan. We got to the section where he speaks about the mahlukot, the disputes. This is a sore spot for anyone who speaks about the transmission of halacha and the Kabbalah and all that. The question: how does it branch? How does halacha branch off and ramifies to so many different opinions? So he says here, "V'chi yipaleh be'einecha al rov ha'de'ot u'mahlekotam b'pirtei hadinim, da' ki lo mechokma sha'alta al ze, וכבר אמר הפילוסוף, כי לפרטים אין מספר, וכולם דברי אלוקים חיים המה." He says, if you will raise a question, why are there so many opinions and why do they dispute on the details of the halakha, you should know that this is not a wise question. That already puts you off. I mean, you could just sets the frame, or that the person who asked the question is not smart, and the person who's answering is knowledgeable, which is a little unfair. It is a pasuk in the Tanakh, lo mechokma sha'alta, but in that context, it just shows us how serious is the question, that that Rabbi Epstein sees the need to set it off from the beginning to say this is not really a question. And the philosopher said lepratim en mispar, there's no limit to the details. I don't know to which philosopher he refers, but we know that Maimonides, who was a philosopher and his thinking mode was that of a philosopher, viewed his work of halakha as one that presents people with the rules and encourage people to learn the details on their own. We also mentioned the Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Adret, who also says the same, that there's no way to write all the details. But now he quotes, "V'chulam divrei Elokim hayim hema." This is an important statement. All the details are the words of a living God. That is, and he will bring a source in the Talmud, which we'll go to directly. The belief that everything that we find in the Talmud, different opinions on regarding the same law or the same case, they're all the word of the divine God. So that our understanding says that the mahloket is built into the Torah, and the rabbis are only revealing layers of possibilities. That is a view that wants to present, I would say, sort of almost a blind belief that everything is contained in the Torah, and it also makes the possibility of rejecting an opinion by saying that it has no validity, makes it very, very difficult. In a way, you have to accommodate all opinions, only to label some of them as such that you follow practically, and others that you do not follow. So let's look at the Gemara that he quotes. This is from Masechet Hagiga. Wait, I have to stop sharing this and share this. So, in Masechet Hagiga, we have the following story. That story follows, in turn, it's in. He doesn't start the story from the beginning, but I will. And this is Daf Gimel Amud Aleph in Hagiga. Again, okay. Here. תנו רבנן, מעשה ברבי יוחנן בן ברוקה ורבי אלעזר חיסמה, שהלכו להגביל פני רבי יהושע בפקיעין. אמר להם, מה חידוש היה בבית המדרש היום? The story is about Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Elazar. They went to welcome Rabbi Yoshua in the village of Pekiain, which is not far from Tzfat in the Galilee. אמר להם, מה חידוש היה בבית המדרש היום? Was there anything new that was said in the Bet HaMidrash today? אמרו לו, תלמידיך אנו ומימיך אנו שותים. We are your disciples and we drink your water. Meaning that no one can introduce a hidush, a new idea, if you are not there. Everything comes from you. Now, it is important to understand the story in its context, because Rabbi Epstein just gets us half the story. The context is the dispute between Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yoshua over the the question whether the prayer of Arvit is a Reshut or Chova. It's a famous story in Masechet Brachot. Rabbi Yoshua was approached by someone who asked him whether Tfilat Arvit is mandatory or optional. He said it's optional. That same person went and asked Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel says it's mandatory, and that student, this disciple, said, but Rabbi Yoshua said differently. So Rabban Gamliel told him, wait until everybody comes into the Bet HaMidrash, and then you ask your question again. And he did so. Everybody got into the Bet HaMidrash, all the scholars, they were all sitting down, and then Rabban Gamliel signaled to that person to ask the question. So he asked the question, and Rabban Gamliel answered that it is mandatory, and then he asked, is there anyone here who disagrees with me? Rabbi Yoshua himself said, no, we all agree with you. Rabban Gamliel said, I was told that you disagree with me. Rabbi Yoshua answered, right now, since the witness is alive and I'm alive, I cannot deny what he said. If he were dead, I would be able to deny his words. Or in other words, he wished for that disciple to die because he was so upset about the situation. Rabban Gamliel decided to publicly humiliate Rabbi Yoshua, and he told him to stand up while everybody was sitting and learning. But that caused a major unrest among the people, and they all decided to tell the voice projector of Rabban Gamliel. He had a man who would repeat his words in a loud voice to keep quiet, and as a result of this whole unease and unrest, Rabban Gamliel was dethroned and removed from being the head of the yeshiva. Later on, they reconciled with him, and they made an arrangement according to which he would be teaching for 2 Shabbatot, and Rabbi Eliezer 1 Shabbat. So, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Now, this whole thing, the Gemara later on says, who was that disciple who asked the question? It was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was a friend and a colleague of Rabbi Yoshua. So, it is obvious from the way the story is told, and from other instances in which Rabban Gamliel humiliated Rabbi Yoshua, that Rabban Gamliel abused his power, and the rabbis were not happy with that. The regular victim of Rabban Gamliel's abuse was Rabbi Yoshua, and the rabbis were trying to push him to stand up to him, and he refused. He said I have a certain respect for the authority of Rabban Gamliel. So they staged, without his knowledge, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai and his friends staged this coup d'etat. They dragged Rabban Gamliel into a public confrontation with Rabbi Yoshua, and then got the people excited about that, and they removed him from power. Then Rabbi Yoshua, because of that, seems to withdraw from the Bet HaMidrash. He doesn't want to be involved. He doesn't want to be in the thick of such a dispute. And so this whole story, it's important to know the context, this whole story revolves around a situation where the rabbis debate whether the prayer of Arvit is mandatory or optional. So it's in its core, it's all about a dispute. Now, that dispute, if you would argue it's Divrei Elokim Haim, if this is within the wider context of what Rabbi Epstein said in his introduction, if you say that it's within Divrei Elokim Haim, it's very hard to argue that, because the whole concept of a mandatory prayer is in dispute between Rambam and Ramban. Later on, Maimonides will say that it is mandatory. Maimonides will say it's not mandatory. But even according to Maimonides, who says it's mandatory, it will be only once a day and only in a language and way that you understand. To argue that the status of Tfilat Arvit, whether it's mandatory or optional, could be traced to the Kabbalah LeMoshe Misinai, the tradition, or the Divrei Elokim Haim, is very difficult. So we will have to understand Divrei Elokim Haim as not a direct transmission from the living God, but rather an authorization or empowerment of the rabbis to act as the representative of God. That is the background. So the students of Rabbi Yoshua go to greet him in Pekin, and he says, "Did you learn anything new?" Suggesting that that's something they have to learn. They said, we are your students. And he answered, Amar lahem af al pichen, אי אפשר לבית המדרש בלא חידוש. Now those words can be understood as a statement that you always learn something new, that it is impossible for you, the students, the disciples, to be in the Bet HaMidrash and not learn something new. But it can also be understood as Rabbi Yoshua demands a dynamic approach to halakha. He says the Bet HaMidrash that only repeats that which was taught by previous generation is not Bet HaMidrash. It's a Xerox machine. It is not active. It's passive. It just moves on information from one generation to another. Or in other words, in today's world, it would be a book. A book is a contained passive unit that you read and you know the knowledge that's there. There's no dynamics around that book. And I think that is what Rabbi Yoshua is saying. He says, "If shal bet midrash belo chidush," something must move on. Shabbat shel mi hayta? He asks, who was the speaker this Shabbat? And the answer, Shabbat shel Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah hayta. He asks, "Uva me hayta haggadah hayom?" That, by the way, is a midrashic or Agadah paragraph that has, I think, broad literature around it from different commentators and scholars. I'm just reading it the way I understand it in our context. They ask, what was the topic today? Amru lo befarashat hakel. Hakel is the mitzvah of bringing everyone to Yerushalayim on the Sukkot following the 7th year, the Shemitah, and learning Torah with them. Umad Rashba, and he asks now, so what did he say about it? Hakel et ha'am, ha'anashim ve'anashim ve'ataf. The Torah says, Hashem tells Moshe, you have to gather all the people, men, women, and children. Im anashim ba'im lilmod, nashim ba'od lishmoa, taf lama ba'in, כדי ליתן שכר למביאיהן. אמר להם, מרגלית טובה הייתה בידכם וביקשתם לאבדה ממני. So they tell him that the drasha of the rabbi was on the topic of Akel, and what was said was that anashim, nashim, v'taf, men, women, and children. Men come to learn, women come to hear, but why would the children come? The answer is to reward those who bring them. And he answers, he says, I had a precious pearl, and you were going to make me lose it. Oh, sorry, you had a precious pearl, and you were trying to deny me that pearl. Meaning, he thought it was really an amazing statement, an amazing teaching. At first sight, it doesn't seem so amazing, but there are two ways to look at it. One is that he speaks about education, that when the children come with their parents. They travel this whole distance to Yerushalayim only to hear the words of the Torah. That instills in them appreciation for Torah. So when you say Liten Sachar Limvihem, the reward, we're not talking about a monetary or even spiritual reward that is quantitative, the way that you could say you got that much for bringing your child to the Bet HaMikdash or to Yerushalayim to hear the Torah, but rather the real reward for a parent is to see that for the parents is to see that their children are doing the right thing. How could you guarantee that your children will do the right thing? By being a role model. And doing the pilgrimage to Yerushalayim in order to learn is being a role model. That's one way to understand that. The other way maybe one layer. The other layer, again, is within the context of Rabban Gamliel. The Talmud says in Masechet Berachot that when Rabban Gamliel was moved from office, they also removed the restrictions that Rabban Gamliel placed on the Bet HaMidrash. And his restrictions were, Kol talmid she'en tocho kevaro lo yikanes lilmod. Whomever is a hypocrite should not come into the Bet HaMidrash to learn. So it's very difficult. How could you filter the hypocrites? How can you decide whether this person is tocho kevaro? Maybe he meant that there are people who study not for the sake of learning or for the sake of being teachers or judges, but for the sake of honor, glory, money, whatever it is. And he said those people should not come in. When they removed the guards or the bouncers that Rabban Gamliel put there at the entrance of Bet HaMidrash, the Bet HaMidrash filled up. The Gemara exaggerated a little bit, says that 400 new benches were added. That's a little too much. And the Gemara also said that at that night, Rabban Gamliel had the dream showing him that all those new students that were added are really fake, they're worth nothing. And the Gemara also comments on that, it's not true. They only showed him this dream to calm him down, but they really were good people. But this whole discussion of bringing people in or leaving them at the door has to do also with the dynamic approach of Rabbi Yehoshua versus the static approach of Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel believes in the solid and monolithic hierarchy that he receives as the heir of Bet David, and he wants to make sure that only select people will be part of the elite that studies the Torah, and that they will have the obedience that will make them adhere to the halacha and transmit it to the next generation without change. And in several times he says, I did, when he gets into disputes with Rabbi Yehoshua or with Rabbi Eliezer Gadol, Rabbi Eliezer ben Urkenus, he says, Galui ve'yadua lefanecha, he addresses God and he says, you know, shelo lichvodcha asiti ve'lo lichvod bet abba, ela shelo tirbena machlokot b'Yisrael. I didn't do it for my own glory or the glory of my family, but rather to prevent the disputes in the nation. So he wants to maintain everything under control, and that maybe also controls the students. Rabbi Yehoshua, on the other hand, is of the school that says open Torah study for everyone, because you don't know who can make a contribution. So when he says you had a precious pearl, what is the precious pearl? The idea that you bring the children with you to learn, because you are going to excite them and put them on the track of learning and later on becoming leaders, and you don't know which one of them will become really the next leader of the generation. So that ties in with the previous one of Yeh Efshar lebet HaMidrash belo chidush. So we see here in the story already the tension between the dynamic approach of Rabbi Yehoshua and the static approach of Rabban Gamliel. And they tell him, now we go back to the story, Ve'od darash et Hashem me'amarta hayom v'Hashem me'emircha hayom. This is a pasuk from Deuteronomy, from Devarim. Et Adonai amarta lech hayom liot lecha le'Elohim וללכת בדרכיו ולשמוע חוקיו ומצוותיו ומשפטיו ולשמוע בקולו. This is part of a covenant formula that says you chose God to be your God and God chose you to be His nation. So the way Rabbi Elazar explained it is אתם עשיתוני חטיבה אחת בעולם ואני אעשה אתכם חטיבה אחת בעולם. You have made me one unit in the world, or a concept, and I will make you into one concept, one unit, shene'emar, as it says, ומי כעמך ישראל גוי אחד בארץ. Who is like your nation, Israel, one nation in the land. That could be a statement that was done on the backdrop of the rise of Christianity. Now here we come finally to the quote of Rabbi Epstein in Arokh HaShulhan. Afu patah ודרש דברי חכמים כדורבנות וכמסמרות נטועים בעלי אסופות ניתנו מרועי אחד. Yeah, this is a verse in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes, and there it says, the word literally means this. The words of the sages are like spurs, the spur that is used to spur the animal. וכמסמרות נטועים, and like planted nails, so really driven nails, a nail that's driven into the wood. Ba'alei asupot, the owners or the masters of gatherings. Asupot are either gathering of people or gathering of material. Nitenu mero'ei had, they all came from one shepherd. So the analogy is somewhat ambiguous. What is the connection between the spurs and the nails? What is the meaning of Ba'alei Asupot? And this is what the Gemara deals with. It could be that in general, like Rambam says in his discussion of parables, that there's no need to look at each item of this analogy and look for a direct comparison. In general, the author of Kohelet says that the words of the sages are like spurs that encourage the animal, in this case the people, to walk in the right path. Masmerot netu'im, there would be the poles that are planted along the path to direct the people in a certain way. Not the people, sorry, the animals in the field and the people here. Ba'alei supot, that would lead people to gather together. Nitenu meroi echad. So, and they all have one shepherd. So the analogy would be that when you see the sheep grazing, it seems like they're scattered, and actually this is a common analogy in the Tanakh. Katzon asher en lahem ro'eh, like a sheep without a shepherd. So, and the opposite would be that when you think that the sheep, the flock, has no guide, there's no central command, you realize that there is one person that guides the whole flock, and what he uses in order to guide the flock are the dorbanot, are the spurs, and masmeot netuim, and poles that are planted in specific locations to guide the sheep into their places. So this is how the shepherd makes sure that all are what we could call on the same page. The same way, the Talmidei Chachamim, though you might see. That I'm still not getting to that to the explanation as they explain it, but rather the pshat of the pasuk, what Kohelet was saying, that the words of the sages, though you might see the people as a nation not all on the same page, but they all stem originally from one source, and they all try to put the people on the right path. But however, in the drasha, they ask this question: Lama nimshelu divrei Torah ledorban? Why were the words of the Torah compared to a spur? Lomar lecha, ma dorban הזה מכוון את הפרה לתלמיה להוציא חיים לעולם? אף דברי תורה מכוונים את לומדיהן מדרכי מיתה לדרכי חיים. Just as the spur direct the cow to plow the field and to bring life to the world, the words of Torah direct people to gain life. Would you say that just as the spur is mobile, I mean, is not solid or stable, so divrei Torah are not stable? Talmud lomar masmerot. Then the pasuk adds the word masmer, nail is planted into the board or pole, whatever it is, and does not move. Ima masmer ze haser velo yater, av divrei Torah haserin velo yeterin. So now you would say that, and they're going with a minimalist approach of like making a direct analogy and comparison between the two, the mashal and the nimshal. So the masmer, when you drive nail into a piece of wood and you leave it outside, it corrodes over time, and you have less than the original product. So for that reason, that's what the Gemara says, that the pasuk goes on to say, Talmud lomar netu'im, ma neti'a zo para verava, av divrei Torah parin veravin. The words of the Torah multiply. Now all this drasha it's not clear who says it, because it opens with the word afu patach vedarash. Afu patach vedarash seems to suggest that Rabbi Yoshua replied to their statement with that drasha. And the way I understand his drasha is again in the from this point of view of the dynamism of Torah. He says the spur, which seems to be harsh, but it directs the cow to plow the field and to bring forth life. That's a dynamic approach. This is not just a revelation of a static situation. The Talmid Chacham is not supposed to just hand us a final product, but he does the process of plowing and planting and sowing and bringing forth a plant. And he says, even though there's a comparison to a nail, masmer, which is immutable in a way, it is followed by the word neturim, saplings or plants that keep on multiplying and producing. So Rabbi Yoshua is in essence speaking about the being creative and productive within the Torah and not leaving it as static. So now Ba'alei Asupot. Now we get to the word the masters of gatherings. Elu Talmidei Chachamim sheyoshvin asupot ve'oskin b'Torah. The rabbis, the scholars are sitting together and they study Torah. Halalu metamein v'halalu metaharin, halalu osrin v'halalu matirin, halalu posim v'halalu machshirin. Some of them say it's pure, some say it's impure, some say it's allowed, forbidden. It is okay, it is not okay. One would say, how can I study Torah? Talmud lomar, kulam nitnu mero'ei echad. They were all given from one shepherd. El echad netanan. It was one God. Parnas echad amaran. Mipi adon kol ha'ma'asim baruch hu. So it was all said by God. This is the story that Rabbi Epstein quotes here in Arokh HaShulhan. Now let's go back to his drasha and see this. Now he brings a commentary on that from Rashi. The chipeligay. So just one second again back to the story. He says that in the drasha of Rabbi Yoshua, when he describes the ramification, or the ramifying of the study of Torah, he says that this could be a deterrent to people. People would say, "How can I study Torah when there are so many different options, the different opinions? I don't know. I would not know what is the right thing to do." And the answer is, don't worry, it all comes from one source. So Rashi explained, the chipli tret ana'e o tre amora'e bedin, o b'isur veter, kol had amar hachi mistaber ta'ama, en kan sheker klal. The fear is the fear of rendering part of the Torah or part of the study invalid or false. Because one would say, if I have two sages of the Mishnah or two sages of the Talmud who disagree on a certain halacha, it could be either din, which is monetary issues, or isur ve'eter, the laws of kashrut, usually whatever is related to shhita, ta'arovot, mixtures of isur ve'eter is called isur ve'eter. And each one of them says, this is the rational, this is what makes sense. One would say that it's false. So says Rashi, en kan sheker klal. It's not a lie. Why? Dechol had v'had zevara didei ka'amar. Mar yaiv ta'ama le'etera, or mar yaiv ta'ama le'isura. Each one of them says his own opinion. One explains why there would be a reason to make it forbidden. One gives a reason why it would be permitted. One medame milta le'milta hachi, umar medame be'anyana harina. One draws the analogy in that way, and another one draws an analogy to a different case. And you can say that both are the words of the living God. Zimnin deshayach hai ta'ama, וזמנין דשייך הטעמה, שהטעם מתהפך לפי שינוי הדברים בשינוי מועט. It says they all come from one God, because sometimes that reason applies, sometimes that reason applies. And there could be, that reason could apply in one case and not the other. That really does not solve the problem. You realize that. But rather, I would say that diverts the problem to another level. 1 second, and that is the what we call the dialectics of the Talmud, and also the dialectics of Rashi and Ba'alei Tosafot. The attempt to say that everything comes from the same source, and it's all connected. Instead of saying there's no way to fit them all into one system, we have to say one of them should be rejected. One of them was only an attempt in understanding the halacha, but eventually it is not valid. Rather, this is the modus operandi of the Talmud and later on of the Tosafot. Then, where you have a mahlokat, a dispute between two rabbis, you usually try to create a third opinion and to say, let's say that there is an argument about a certain case. The Talmud would say, in case A, let's say to the extreme right, they all agree that it's permitted. In the case B, to the extreme left, they all agree that it's permitted. Well, they argue about case C, which is in the middle, which one says, so they try to limit the area of dispute in order to establish the idea that all comes from one source. Yes, Josh, you had the question. It says, now, Rabbi Epstein brings a proof that that this is true, that everything comes from the Torah, from God. וכמופת לזה שלא תמצא בכל הש"ס מחלוקת בעיקרי המצווה. הכל מודים שפרי עץ הדר הוא אתרוג, והכל מודים שעין תחת עין ממון. Everybody agrees that the פרי עץ הדר, or fruit of a glorious tree, is an etrog, and all agree that ayin tahat ayin, an eye for an eye, means monetary damage and not physical damage. אלא דכשבאו לדורשו מהפסוק, מר דריש לה מהיקרא, ומר דריש לה מהיקרא וכולם אמת. Rather, when they came to learn it from the pasuk, one used this verse and another one used the other verse, and they're all true. I'll go through his examples, and then we'll go back to categorize those examples and see what happens here. And this is a practice that we saw before in other introductions, like the Mishnah Berurah, of presenting evidence that is not always valid. It's when you analyze the one by one, you realize that we are mixing categories when we have to go through it to see. Meaning, we are now going to be presenting with categories of halachot that has to do with biblical traditions, rabbinical traditions, practices, etc. He says, "Hashamata sheyahloku kama batim yesh betfilin shel rosh." Did you ever hear that people will have a dispute over how many divisions, how many partitions are in the tefillin shel rosh, or how many parashiyot, how many paragraphs should be written in the mezuzah, or how many blessings you have in the prayer, or how many blessings there are before Kriyat Shema or after Kriyat Shema, or in the blessings of Pesukei de Zimra? No, the whole nation agrees that there are 4 partitions in tefillin and 2 parashot in the mezuzah and 18 blessings in tefillah except for Birkat Aminim, and 2 blessings before Kriyat Shema and 1 afterwards. Vashinui banusach, the different formula, the different nusach of prayer. One says Ahavat Rabbah, Ahavat Olam, or one says Hodu before Baruch Shamar, one says Baruch Shamar after, and Shinui. Anyone can do whatever he wishes with the tefillah. They're both the same. אלא שאין דרך ארץ לשנות מבני שנהגו הציבור. So it's not polite to not follow what the community does. So when one who is used to this nusach goes to a place where they pray with another nusach, he should change his own to adjust to the community, because we all agree how many blessings and how many prayers we say. Have you ever heard that among the sages there will be a mahloket, a dispute, regarding the essence of the melacha or Shabbat or Yom Tov, or regarding the days, that they will, that one will say that it's earlier, the other one will say that it's later? Halila lo hayta kazot b'Yisrael. That never happened. They all accept Shabbat and Yom Tov at the same time, miktzeh olam v'ad katzeu, from one end of the world to the other, following sunset nimkomotam b'moshvotam. So now let's go back and see whether this is valid, like all these arguments about the unity of the law. So first of all, we have to realize that we have here biblical, rabbinical, and other practices all all in one pile. The question Tfilin Shel Rosh, we understand it's a biblical commandment. How many the mitzvah of mezuzah, without getting to the parashot himself, biblical commandment. Brachot in the tefillah, that's a rabbinical thing that started according to tradition by Ezra Sofer and Bedino, the Great Assembly, which would put it at around 510, 520 BCE, way after the destruction of the temple and the end of prophetic vision. But according to the scholars, it was probably composed in the first century of the Common Era. So that's regarding Tefillah. The brachot of Shema before and after, or the brachot of Psukei de Zimra, Baruch Shamar V'Ishtabach, have different status. One of them is rabbinical, but later to the Amidah. The Psukei de Zimra is even later to that, probably Talmudic. The Nusach, the formulas of Ahava Rabbah ve'Ahavat Olam, comes from a much, much later period. When we look at the Sidurim of Rav Amram Gaon, Rasag, and others, and when he speaks about Karem Lechet Shabbat ve'Yom Tov, that the Torah doesn't specify what is the melacha. We have the aspect of melacha, and Shabbat ve'Yom Tov, the beginning of Shabbat and the end of Shabbat, is not something which is specified in the Torah. The Torah only uses the term Yom HaShabbat, and that's like part of the general approach of the Torah to not be too specific when it comes to our private practice. But we'll go back again and go one by one to these halachot. So, 1 second. Let's go back now. I'm doing it in stages. Now let's go back and analyze one by one. This is a favorite example. Rambam also brings that example. Everybody agrees that the fruit of a glorious tree is etrog. It says only people derive it from different psukim. Now, if you go to the Talmud and you look at those pesukim from which that halacha was derived, the first question that you're going to ask would be: Is it really written in the pasuk? Meaning the word to say that Mar darash la mehaikra, Umar darash la mehaikra is inaccurate. Let me show you this. This is in Masechet Kiddushin. In Masechet Kiddushin, it's brought, I think, all Masechet Sukkah, but this, in the very beginning of Kiddushin, there is this discussion of the word derech. One second. I don't see the Gemara at the moment, but in the discussion in Masechet Sukkah of Hadar, what is Priyas Hadar? The rabbis go with different explanations of how do we know that Hadar is a trog, and most of the commentaries ignore the grammar of the word. There's only one that says if you take the word Hadar in Hebrew with kamatz under the hey, kamatz under the dalet, it means glory or splendor. And they said there are other splendid trees that could fit that description of Hadar. And then the other commentaries read the word as if it was with the nikud of patah under the hay and kamatz and dagesh in the dalet, and that means that which dwells, hadar be'ilano, and they say etrog could live in the tree or dwell in the tree from one year to another, and therefore that's the only fruit that fits the description. And finally, the most intriguing drasha there is that they say that the word hadar is water in Greek, and because the consonant hey dalet resh corresponds to HDR, which are hydro in Greek. So if we go back now to the text of Arokh HaShulhan, when he says Akol Modim Everybody agrees it's an etrog, yes, because they had an oral tradition that this is the fruit. When they derived it from the pasuk, they did not derive it from this pasuk or the other. They used the same word, and they played with it in a way that has nothing to do with the Hebrew. So the question that Rabbi Epstein dodges here is the agenda and the mechanism of drasha. Because it's not clear at all. Let's put it this way: if you would have started with the verse, if we only had the text Pri Eitz Hadar, the fruit of the tree of Hadar, which we would read splendor, there was no way that we would end with the etrog, or maybe each one would take a different fruit. The reason that we take the etrog is purely because of tradition. But he presents it as something that was derived from one pasuk or another. Same with that statement. Akol modim she'ayin tahat ayin mamon. Right? He says everybody agrees that ayin tahat ayin means monetary and not literal meaning, which is money. So, which is physical damage. I mean, if you take it as it is, you would say ayin tahat ayin means that if someone poked someone else's eye, you will poke his eye as well. Now, there is an opinion in the Talmud that ayin tahat ayin is literal, ayin tahat ayin mamash, and the drasha took it out of that context and made it out of that explanation and made it to be mamon. So this is not a simple thing that say hakol modim she'ayin tahat ayin mamon, because there is an opinion that ayin tahat ayin mamash, it was rejected. So, but it was rejected, and then we say that everybody agrees on it. It's not that simple. We don't have a dispute about, now we go to tefillin. There's no dispute about how many partitions are in the tefillin, but there isn't a dispute about their order. The famous dispute between Rabbeinu Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, which, in my opinion, and you could actually prove that, goes all the way back to Masechet Menachot. So already in the time of the Talmud, there was a question: what is the order of the parashiot in the tefillin? Which is surprising, because it's the work of scribes, of professional scribes. They should have known how to write it. And if you had a question of how did my father do it, just open his tefillin and you'll know. It's not something that people did, do once a year and it disappears. It's a physical object that you have. Should open it. As a matter of fact, when the Hazon Ish was presented with tefillin that were found, or they told him that tefillin were found in Matzadah, and they were written according to the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam, he said, "How do you know that they were valid tefillin? Maybe they put them in Geniza." So meaning that we dismiss the archaeological and physical evidence. And again, we go when we speak about Ahava Rabbah, Ahavat Olam. This has nothing to do with Divrei Elokim Haim. Those are differences that are so late in our tradition, after the biblical text, after the Talmudic disputes. Now this Mahloket Be'Ikarei Melechet Shabbat V'Yom Tov. Yes, there was a Mahloket about Ikarei Shabbat V'Yom Tov. I'm writing about it in my daily email about the halacha, and the Talmud says clearly that the idea of 39 melachot and the list is the opinion and the methodology of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He is the one who introduced this to the Mishnah. Before him, there was no clear system to categorize the melachot, and when you go through all the Masechet Shabbat and you put together all the actions that the different rabbis consider to be melachot, you will get to about 50 and not 39, if not more. So there was a mahloket, only that the other opinions were rejected, or in the case of melachot, they were not totally rejected, but rather they were recategorized by saying, what you said, this will be a melacha, and the other one, which you rejected, will become a tolada, will become a subsidiary or secondary melacha. Finally,
Rabbi,
yes,
Rabbi, going back to the berachot of Kirat Shema,
yes,
forget the berachot. Isn't there a machloket about which paragraphs are in Shema? And v'ahavta v'aya and
yes. I think that there was a question about the third tzitzit was not necessarily to be included. Yes.
I even remember a statement in the Talmud where the rabbi was so tired, he said, make sure I say this before I go to sleep. Just the line, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad.
Yes. Yes, and that ties into the Arvit Rishut L'Chova. Yeah. Right. But now the last thing that we really touch very briefly on, because we have to finish, it says, Kol Yisrael mekablim HaShabbat v'Yom Tov b'sha'a achat. Everybody agrees that it is sunset. And this is not true. Everybody argues, what is sunset? Is it sunset 18 minutes before, 25 minutes before, 72 minutes after, darkness, 35 minutes, Rabbeinu Tam? There were volumes written about the opinion of Rabbeinu Tam, which most probably, even though it seems like he said it's 72 minutes after Shki'ah, it actually is 35 minutes after Shki'ah. That had to do with the way he saw the day in Europe versus in other countries. But 35 minutes after sunset makes sense because it's about around darkness. But that would apply, according to Rabbeinu Tam, not only when Shabbat is over, but also when Shabbat starts. There's no reason for him. He never says that it would only apply when Shabbat is over. Everybody now keeps Rabbeinu Tam when Shabbat is over, and very few rely on Rabbeinu Tam when Shabbat starts, even when it is for an emergency. But the statement that everybody does the same, it is today, in his time and day, Orthodox communities became much more strict on those issues, and they try to be unified on the same page. But it is not so. So we will continue with this discussion, but just saying, we see how difficult is this issue of the mahloket, where it comes from, and how to digest it within that mind frame of everything comes from one source and it's all divine.